Okay.
Yeah, because sometimes it doesn't work. I had this experience before.
Yeah, it started. So
I'm sorry, the webinar started already. Okay.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So let's mute ourselves and I will start the slideshow. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. See you in a few minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 5th session of the International Water Colloquium today, organized by UNU-FLORES, TU Dresden, and the University of Bonn. My name is Christina, and together with Rarit from UNU-FLORES, we will guide you through the session and moderate today. I'm very pleased to have today 3 panelists on board, who is Guillaume, who's joining us from UNU-INWEH in Canada. Good morning. And there is Alpha, representing the National Research Institute for Rural Engineering, Water and Forestry, as well as the Institution of Agriculture, Research and Higher Education in Tunisia. Good afternoon to you. And good evening to Barira Fatima from the Pakistan Council of Research in Water Resources. So before we start the sessions, the presentations and the dialogue with the panelists, I would like to do some small housekeeping. So for people who are joining us via Zoom, please use the Q&A section, a function in the bottom of your screen to put there any content-related questions, which we will try to address after the presentations. And if you have any technical issues or other things to ask us, please use the chat function for that. And for people who are joining us via Facebook today, please use the comment section below the live streaming. And we try to address also the questions afterwards in the end of the session. And yes, and now I give the floor to you, and I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Good morning from Canada. My name is Guillaume, and initially I would like to thank UNU-FLORES, the Dresden University of Technology and University of Bonn for giving us this opportunity. Today we will be talking about some water issues and also issues related to taking decisions for SDGs, especially in our context, SDG6. I would also like to thank Dr. Alpha from Tunisia and Ms. Barira Fatima from Pakistan. They've been working with us since 2016. They've been doing an amazing work, and they will be presenting with me today about the SDG6 Policy Support System. So I will start with my presentation that will give you an introduction of the challenges, let me see here, of the challenges of producing evidence for SDG6. So from my understanding, probably everyone here knows a little bit about SDGs. So SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals, and they've been adopted by all UN member states in 2015. And they express a set of ambitions, of targets that are to be achieved by 2030. So within 15 years from the adoption of this development agenda. And they somehow express challenges that perhaps our countries are facing now regarding sustainable development. There's one thing that is very important about the this agenda for sustainable development and about the SDGs is that we are not only concerned about the outcome of the SDGs, but we are also concerned about how we are achieving them. What's the path we are taking to reach those targets and goals? And why is that? Well, somehow we now understand that our goal is not only to check off a list of targets and indicators, like a country can say, oh, we achieved this outcome and now we are good, we finished this task, but also to truly ask a question of how we can achieve development in a sustainable way, how the path towards that that goal or that target is also sustainable. In the agenda, we do have a goal that is specific to water and sanitation issues, which is the SDG6. But as you probably know, water is an issue, is a challenge across different targets and goals, such as poverty, hunger, good health and well-being, climate action. We also have water as an important aspect of sustainable cities, and so on and so forth. Just to give you a very brief explanation of what SDG6 is. So basically SDG6 has 6 outcome targets, which are those aspirations that I mentioned before that are universal, which means that all countries aim to achieve this outcome targets. And we also have 2 means of implementation targets within SDG6. And this is also what I mentioned before, that within this agenda of development, we have a growing concern about how we achieve these outcome targets. What's the path we are taking? And asking questions about how sustainable is the path we are taking to achieve SDG6. However, when we look at the latest assessment of SDG6, what we see is that we are not on track to achieve SDG6 globally. And why is that? Well, one of the reasons why we are not on track is that the enabling environment of SDG6 might not be sufficient for achieving this very ambitious goal. And by enabling environment, what I mean is all those conditions that are needed to achieve the targets and indicators of SDG6 in a sustainable way, which means that that we can assure that that progress, that achievement is sustainable. Also, one of the key messages of this report is that business as usual policies and means of implementation will not be sufficient to achieve SDG6. So this raises an important question that we are not aiming to answer in this presentation today because the answer is very complex. But how do we achieve SDG6 targets and indicators? How we get there? As we can see when we analyze how countries stand against SDG6 today, achieving SDG6 is a big challenge, and it's not an easy task for any country. So, so somehow this question stays unanswered because it is extremely related to the conditions of each individual country. So we try to understand what would be the conditions needed for these countries to achieve SDG6. And also to clarify, I think this is very important. I mentioned before that enabling environment of SDG6 stands for all those conditions that are needed to achieve SDG6. And these include governance, finance, capacity development, data acquisition and monitoring, among other things. This will come back later in the presentation. But I just wanted to give the audience a glimpse of what we are talking when we mention the enabling environment. So from that assessment of SDG6, that we are very unlikely to achieve this goal by 2030, comes another assessment of the enabling environment of SDG6. Today, our assessment indicates that there is a lack of understanding of how these enabling environments can drive progress and success towards the achievement of SDG6. So there is a poor linkage, or let's say a poorly understood linkage between the enabling environment and the outcome targets. Moreover, when we discuss this issue with countries, what we realize is that there's almost no data on the enabling environment of SDG6. And this data, this evidence on the enabling environment is needed if countries are to set policies and decisions and workable plans, realistic plans for achieving SDG6. And I think this is an important point. This evidence on the enabling environment may be available somehow, but one feedback that we get from countries when we are discussing this issue is that this evidence may be missing. They may even even overlapping or fragmented. And why is that? Well, mainly because this evidence is collected and produced by different agencies, by different actors within the governments, and it is not strongly connected to agencies that are dealing with the SDG6. So what are the current needs for SDG6? According to our assessment, this is the reality. Countries, they don't have evidence on the enabling environment for achieving SDG6. So we somehow need to build interventions, to make decisions, to propose policies in a context where data is missing. And this is very unlikely to change in the coming years because of the complexities of producing this evidence. Another thing that is very important is that working with countries has highlighted the need for a place, for a platform where different actors within the governments can communicate together to collect, produce, and decide on the evidence for the enabling environment of SDG6. As I mentioned before, one of the major concerns is that this evidence is overlapping or fragmented across different actors. And as we are going to see in Dr. Alpha's presentation, this was a very important aspect of the work conducted in Tunisia. So this was a brief introduction of the background, what are our challenges regarding the enabling environment of SDG6. So looking at these aspects, UNU-INWEH and partners developed a system that aims to address the challenges of producing evidence on the enabling environment of SDG6 whenever this data is not available. And by doing that, we also aim to foster collaboration between experts and decision makers through an evidence framework. This will become a little bit more clear as we progress the presentation. So what is the SDG6 Policy Support System? So the SDG6 Policy Support System, or as we call the Sdgpss, is an online tool where countries, agencies, researchers can enter data, information, and trends and translate all this data into evidence. But it's not only any evidence. The aim of this tool is to produce evidence that can inform policymakers and decision makers, that can offer some new perspective over the enabling environment for SDG6. How the enabling environments of SDG6 are translated in this tool is through the critical components. So as you can see here, the Sdgpss is organized around a component of capacity building, finance assessment, policy and institutional, gender assessment, disaster risk reduction and resilience, and transparency. We also have a component called status, but I think I need to highlight that the goal of this tool is not to track the status of SDG6. This is only a component that were included in the tool to show some information about the status of SDG6. But the goal of the Sdgpss is to produce evidence on the enabling environment of SDG6. And how these critical components came together? Well, first, they were decided by their ability to encourage the creation of national enabling environments for SDG6 targets, and also that they were supported by at least one tool or framework that was already developed by international organizations. What I need to remind us here is that in 2016, when we started working on this project, there was not a lot of clarity on the enabling environment for all SDG6 indicators and targets. they were pretty new to the development discussions at that moment. So the challenge here, when we were discussing the components of the enabling environment of SDG6, was to find in the literature enough discussions on what would be necessary to achieve those targets and indicators that were new, that were not previously present in discussions from the Millennium Development Goals. And also, this is very important from our project. These components were also discussed by our project partners from the countries we were working with, such as Republic of Korea, Ghana, Pakistan, Tunisia, and Costa Rica. So how does the Sdgpss work? So it's a very simple workflow in this tool. Basically, whenever countries or agencies or researchers are using the tool, they have to enter the data. And how do they do that? They enter through the questionnaire. So this was how we thought would be easier for anyone using the tool, was to enter data in a systematic way. And what is the output of the tool? Well, the output is the reporting page, which I'm going to show in details now, because this is what we need. The reporting of the tool is basically what we were looking for in the beginning of the project. So these are just a few examples. So whenever people enter data on the tool, what the tool generates is a set of graphics that aim to inform the progress on the enabling environment for each indicator of SDG6. And this was something new at that moment. We didn't find enough data on the SDG6 at the indicator level, and that was what we were looking for. And finally, we reached this page, which is the evidence framework of the SDG6 Policy Support System, and this is the main outcome of our tool. As you can see here on the slide, we have all those policy critical components. So we have capacity, finance, policy, and institutional, and we do have all the other components, and we have here all the indicators of SDG6. And what the evidence framework shows is an assessment of the progress against each indicator and each component of the enabling environment of SDG6. And this is perhaps the first time that we can see the progress against each indicator of SDG6 and the enabling environment. So this is brand new evidence that are generated at the national level when countries enter data in the tool. What is also very important, and I hope that everyone can see on the screen, is that we have here adequate progress, inadequate progress, we have in progress, but we also have this very important one, call it no evidence, which means that for this specific indicator and this specific component, the data is not available, or the data was not produced or was not found. And why this is very important? Well, it's whenever we were discussing in the beginning of the project, and missing data was mentioned as the biggest concern for countries about the enabling environment of SDG6, we could not pinpoint exactly where this data was missing. So now, by using this tool, countries can see, okay, so now data is missing for this indicator and for this aspect of the enabling environment. What can we do? Can we make decisions even if this data is missing? Can we produce this data? Can we prioritize other components or other indicators? So this gives another dimension to the decision-making process within the countries. How we have been working on this project over the past 2 years. Basically, our project partners, Costa Rica, Tunisia, Pakistan, and the Republic of Korea, day-to-day work as regional hubs for the Sdgpss because they have experience in developing, implementing, and using this tool. So in this past 2 years, we have engaged with 34 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Africa and the Middle East, in Asia, to discuss the possibilities of using the tool in other contexts, which means implementing and using the tool in other countries. This tool was developed in the early stages of the SDG6 implementation. So we understand that the tool needs some refinement because our understanding of decision-making and the enabling environment of SDG6 has progressed over time. So engaging with these countries has been very important for us to understand how the tool needs to be updated and how the tool needs to work better for countries, to give this evidence to countries. I think we will get more information when we hear from Alpha and Barrera about their experiences using and implementing the tool. So if I need to summarize the Sdgpss, basically this tool aims to address the fact that we don't have enough evidence on the enabling environment of SDG6, and this will likely be the reality for the next few years. So countries that need to act now to achieve SDG6, they need to produce, they need to take decisions, they need to build new policies in the context of missing data. So that's the reality. And we need a platform, we need a space where we can find evidence in this context. And also very importantly, the Sdgpss, they aims to serve as a platform that encourages the cooperation between agencies and the research community. As I mentioned before, when we were assessing the enabling environment of SDG6 right in the beginning in 2016, a big concern among countries was that this evidence was overlapping. They were just fragmented over different actors within the governments of countries. So by producing this tool, what we also aim is to get together those people to discuss the data that is needed to inform policy and decision makers. And we also believe that SDG6 can work for other SDGs as well, with some level of refinement and adaptation. The Sdgpss aims to inform countries and is targeted to that audience, but anyone that is willing to check the tool can access through the website sdgpss.net. And I think you can have a very good idea of what this tool looks like and what it stands for. So this is my presentation today. Now I think my colleague Dr. Alpha from Tunisia will be joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guillaume. So let me share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Not in full mode yet.
Is it okay now?
No, it's the one on the bottom, this little icon.
Okay. Is it fine now? Is it fine now?
No, it's not. Ah, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. It depends on where you are. First of all, I would like to thank UNU-FLORES, UNU-INWEH, and all the partners, the Technical University of Dresden and University of Bonn, for the kind invitation to be part of this International Water Colloquium and a series of webinars. So before building on what Guillaume has already said and making things more concrete and more tangible, and giving you an overview about what has been done in Tunisia regarding the implementation of the Sdgpss in Tunisia, let me first just give you an idea about the national context. So in Tunisia, the technical leaders in charge of the SDGs in general was appointed as the Ministry of Development, International Cooperation and Investment. So this ministry is in charge of the National Voluntary Report that has been published last year on 2019. And this report was based on the work done by a number of working groups deriving from a committee gathering ministries, public entities, civil society, unions, etc. And there were, as I have said, several working groups, as many as the SDGs. All those people contributed to the preparation of this report. However, unfortunately, the SDG6 was not among the priorities at that time. However, well, despite that, the SDGs was in line with our national plan, our national strategies, and our new constitution. So in 2021, fortunately, the SDG6 was included, and it will be included in the National Voluntary Report for the next year. And it will be among the 10 SDGs that has been officially announced by and prioritized by the government. And there will be few targets that will be prioritized. So this is the global context. So in this context, we have been working as a group of experts, a multi-sectoral group of experts, in order to contextualize the Sdgpss and to make it fit for our country, Tunisia. So the group of experts of plus 20 members was established in 2017, representing ministries, departments, agencies, NGOs, research institutes, all these working under the flagship of the Ministry of Agriculture, Water Resources and Fisheries in Tunisia. So you can see here that we have several departments and institutions dealing with water, water planning, water policy, research, as well as institutions and entities in charge of studies, policies, information, international cooperation, beside the office of in charge of gender outreach at the Ministry of Agriculture, some other department dealing with finance and budgeting. So all those people were working on the Ministry of Agriculture. Beside that, we have representatives from the Ministry of Environment, like the Sanitation Utility on us, or the National Agency of Environmental Protection. Beside that, we have the ministry in charge of the SDGs at the national level, which is the MDICI, and the National Institute of Statistics. We have the Ministry of Health as well, but also the support of an active NGO in the water sector, and we got the strong support of the UNDP. All those people were working in order to evaluate first the relevance of the different components that Guillaume has been mentioning, and in order to identify which components are the most relevant to the national context. Second, we were working in order to bring in the expert resource people, those who can contribute to the project and those who can make the project progress easily. But most importantly, we were working in order to contextualize the Sdgpss and to create evidence about the enabling environment. So in the very beginning, the situation was just like this because the Sdgpss was quite raw And we didn't know how to make it fit for Tunisia, how to make it tailored for the national context. It's not about making data fit for the tool, but it's quite the opposite. We were trying to make the tool fit for the country and for the national context. So we have been doing a lot of modifications, like adding, removing questions, but also we have been modifying some questions when we thought that it was not fit for our national context. Besides that, we thought that working separately is not a good methodology. It's not a good way. And gathering the pieces of data is not the best way to achieve the SDG6. So we decided to work as I have mentioned, a multi-sectorial group, trying to work collaboratively, trying to communicate and to look for evidence all together in order to make a clear picture of what would be the evidence framework, and in order to understand where do we stand and what is our achievement in enabling the environment. So here is a piece of what we have been doing during the last 4 years. We have almost finished the capacity component and the gender component, and I'm going to give you an idea about what has been done by zooming into these small boxes. So as Guillaume has mentioned, there are different colors, a kind of traffic lights. So the green and the blue means that we are on a good track, in progress, or we have adequate progress. So we don't need a medal for that, but we need to look forward to the next step. What should we do next? But if we have an inadequate progress or no evidence, this doesn't mean that we are the black sheep and that we did not well. But the most important here is to understand where are the gaps and where the limited data are stemming from. All is about interpretation. So here is a zoom of several targets, 6.1 to 6.3 of the SDG6 and the different subcomponent of the gender. So you can notice that we have either inadequate progress or no evidence. And we tried to make an interpretation about of the situation. And we found that we have a lack of gender disaggregated data at the regional level in the rural area. So we have women in the rural area do not have access to economics of agriculture, for instance, and they do not have access to opportunities like loan and subsidies. So we were in lack of evidence. We were in lack of data to enter into the system. We noticed also that we have low access of women in rural area to several things like services, financial services, technologies, information, and so on. Besides that, we noticed a lack of capacities, especially in terms of moderators and trainers in gender mainstreaming. So these are weaknesses, but we have noticed that we have some achievement, like the establishment of the peer counseling of equality in 2016, which role is to produce quantitative and qualitative indicators on gender, but also to establish strategy and gender mainstreaming in politics and social development. Besides that, we have a national strategy for socioeconomic automation established in 2017, in addition to including gender in budgeting of the Ministry of Agriculture, Water Resources and Fisheries, which is a quite big progress. Now let's look at the capacity component where we have adequate progress and some in progress cells. Well, as Guillaume have mentioned, so Sdgpss is producing graphics, and we have been looking at those graphics in addition to the evidence framework. And we noticed that we have some gaps that we have to fill in, like capacity building. So in Tunisia, we still need capacity building in terms of human capacities, because we have a high rate of retirement, of brain drain, and people moving to the private sector, for instance, why we are no more hiring people. Beside that, if we look at the legal aspects, we notice that our water code, which is the overreaching regulation related to the water sector, is still under revision. And beside that, we are not enforcing some regulation in the water sector. Beside that, we are lacking lawyers, specialists in the water sector. In addition to that, we notice that there are some disparities between region, either between urban and rural, or between upstream and downstream of watershed. All these are factors that could contribute to the lack of data that we can enter into the Sdgpss. So to end, or to sum up, what we have learned from this experience during the 4 years. First of all, that the Sdgpss is a strategic tool that could be very helpful and very useful to countries in order to monitor and to report on the enabling environment and to produce data and to inform about policies to help decision makers. Beside that, it's very important to work collaboratively. It's very important to communicate in order to produce data, to collect data, and to produce evidence. So we have to collect all the type of information. Beside that, and you have noticed that we have quantitative and qualitative questions in this Sdgpss, and this requires reaching a consensus. So we have been discussing a lot and deciding. So this effort is quite critical. This is a very important ingredient in reaching and achieving the SDG6. And last but not least, the participation of all actors is very important whenever we are missing data, whenever we are missing, we have gaps, and we do not have informations. So last but not least, I would like to thank the group of experts you can see here who are working during 4 years now. And I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And please do not hesitate if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olfa. Barira, Fatima, you would also like to share a presentation?
Yes, I am sharing my presentation right now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, and the full mode.
Okay. Can you see the full mode as well?
Not yet. Not yet.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So Pakistan is a home of 207 million people, and we have an annual growth rate of 2%. We have 5 administrative units, and in this program, we focused on 4 provinces. SDGs were adopted by federal government as soon as they arrived in 2015. But in SDG6 particularly, the most targets of this goal were provincial subjects. I have just given a brief of the area and population distribution ratio of my country. In my country, the largest province has the smallest ratio of population. Likewise, the institutionalization, management, water resources, issues, diversities, potentials are different. when we started in 2015, we were like, we just adopted it, and our pace of progress was very slow, but slowly it started taking pace. Now we have an SDG cell developed by the support of United Nations Development Program in Federal Ministry of Special Planning, Development, and Special Initiatives. Just like that SDG cell, this is working as an umbrella cell, and in each of the province, planning and development division have a similar SDG cell for the reporting and management of all SDGs. SDG6 is not just a simple goal for water or drinking water and sanitation for all, and most of the people understand. It has different indicators, different targets, and so it has in Pakistan it has different organizations connected to it. PCRWR, my organization, has a role of monitoring and management of water and wastewater, surface water bodies, water related ecosystems, and providing training for the water supply and sanitation agencies and their staff. And likewise, using the same capacity, we introduce SDGpss to the relevant departments. And most recently, we have also developed IWRM implementation guidelines for Pakistan. When we started, what was the major challenge for us? After the constitutional amendment, our water supply subject was gone to the provinces, and it was federal responsibility to report on SDGs. There is a diversity of challenges. In some provinces, institutions were not as developed, but in some provinces, there were two institutions for one single service. And when the SDG started, everyone planned to set up 100% aspiration to be achieved by 2030. But there was no direction where to go and where to start with. And one most important thing, as I have experienced this on many international forums as well, SDG6 is generally perceived as clean drinking water and sanitation goal. To speak with what we have learned while working with the people, SDG6, water and sanitation for all, is not just a goal that starts with drinking water. It is actually working in the reverse order. It starts with 6.A, B, and 6.6. You cannot have clean drinking water access to the people unless you have a good ecosystem for water, you have better IWRM implementation strategy, you have efficient water utilization and equity, you are not polluting your rivers and surface water bodies with the contaminants. Or if all of these targets and indicators are not met, you cannot achieve 6.1. Actually, this is the purpose of naming that goal. So we learned about this SDG6 during this process, and we are very much pleased that we are able to disseminate this piece of information to our stakeholders. SDG tool is actually provided the people a thinking process that setting aspirations is not enough. This is which was done in during MDGs. We just set a target, and we reported that we have provided clean drinking water access to 94% of population. There was no supporting information like what are your financial commitment to achieve that aspiration, what is your capacity, what is your policy and institutional capacity, and have you prepared your aspirations for disaster resilience? So policy support system offered us that much opportunity to think about disaster resilience while planning for sustainable development. Of course, sustainable development is all about that. Therefore, SDG has provided us with the inclusion of DRR and transparency component. It has provided provincial legislative setup and the federal system of reporting a single mechanism of collecting SDGs 6 reporting and then disseminating on to higher forum and use it for further planning. One more thing I would like to say here, as soon as government of Pakistan adopted SDG 2015 in 2015, most of the planning and development institutions, government entities started aligning their projects according to certain goals and targets of SDGs. But they absolutely had no idea how to respond to that information, where are the policies to support to them, how they are going to get that information in the reporting format, that they have done that much service in favor of this particular target or goal. We started with identifying relevant stakeholders using our regional offices in all provinces. Then we communicated with them formally and shared the PSS guidelines and technical guide with them. And then we engage them in a training process. Our training modules generally start with the knowledge of SDG6, what SDG6 is about, how PSS is created, and what are the key resources and information, standard information is behind it. And second thing, as I mentioned earlier, people were working on SDGs, but they had no idea where to get the information, how to incorporate it into the reporting format. So we help them get the information available on public database regarding financial commitment of the government, where the government have to go, how to define the capacity of the government, how to define the capacity building targets in inclination with SDGs. We started with a national workshop in 2017. Then we developed in-house capacity in PCRWR. We conducted 5 provincial workshops and trained 66 sub-national and provincial staff related to SDG6. We developed interactions with them and then gathered feedback from them regarding their use on Sdgpss. By learning from our participants, they need a practical training manual to go through each step on how to use Sdgpss. The UNU's provided guidelines are very much technical, and they are very much supporting on how this system is built to convince them. However, but given the capacity of the field staff and capacity of the field and frontline managers, we have to develop a practical training manual to give them knowledge how to run this system actually. SDG6 in SDG, although it is about so many things in water, but most common thing is the most common target indicator is access to safely managed drinking water. And this is the point where we have received very consolidated, very realistic input with a diverse participation. So we have two kind of during this training workshop, we had two kind of participants. Number one, the manager who are actually the services provider in safely managed drinking water, and secondly, we had the receivers. And those in some provinces, they are the irrigation department who are actually providing drinking water, and in some department they are water supply and sanitation companies. So by collecting all of this information, we get a very realistic and a very genuine information using this tool. After another challenge we had surpassed using Sdgpss, that was to satisfy all the critical components. Using this PSS, we were able to tell them that setting an aspiration is not enough. You have to satisfy other critical components that are first and foremost financial commitment, the capacity commitment, the policy and institutional capacity, gender mainstreaming, disaster preparedness, and of course, transparency. While working on that, another thing came to us. If your pace of development is slow, you think, managers think that it is realistic, but as per national aspiration that was set to 100%, they are not able to achieve that 100%. But according to the when this information was incorporated in PSS, it showed a very high status, as I have highlighted in this summary view. It is showing status 105. This is because in view of the low pace of development, the Balochistan government have to put a very low aspirations. Now there are one particular target of SDG that is beyond provincial government's jurisdiction. That is, one is degree of implementation of IWRM and the reporting on transboundary. This information was again collected by federal institutions in consultation with provincial government, but provincial government were not able to speak or report on these. The most liked and most admired part of SDGpss is estimation of financial flow and showing financial commitments. As you can see that while working on that in SDG in the target 6.4.1, the department said that we demanded a certain amount of fund and we received only financial allocation of 71%. But the enabling environment for the financial commitment, the policies and rules set to get this 71% is only 50%. That means to achieve 6.4.1, the government which is responsible, the government department which is responsible for implementation of SDG 6.4.1 is already working at 50% of financing. Then came the issue of capacity. As I mentioned earlier, there are multiple players in SDG6 only, and they have different capacity issues. So they have already always issues in speaking about capacity, that we cannot say that I have capacity and this department does not have capacity. We received first few feedbacks, and after the interaction from our participants, that for the first time, Forest and Rangeland Department came to know that they have role in SDG6. And likewise, although Pakistan is prone to water-related disasters, but in SDG6 planning, it was not incorporated. But PSS has provided that opportunity to think in that respect. Yes, it is a very good tool for financial planning, and think about aspiration and connection of financial commitment. In certain departments, gender cannot be achieved because in water quality side, it is generally female dominated, and in some field and action and canal irrigation side, it is male dominated. Lower aspiration are realistic. There is no harm in setting low aspirations. And identifying stakeholders is very key. And in two of our workshop, the head of SDG cells came to know about the real stakeholders of SDG6 for the first time. That was also success on our part and on part of SDG6, SDGpss. And during this feedback, our participant gave us feedback in policy institution, the youth involvement questionnaire must be added, and gender role at national and international advisory body must be included, particularly involvement of women at higher level forums. Now that SDGpss is online, it has so many potential. One national manager can manage remotely from the input from a number of subnational managers. He can also approve the input, and particularly it is very much useful in the present scenario of pandemic, when you cannot share the paper reports, you cannot talk frequently, you just have to add the information. Your manager sitting in Islamabad or in provincial headquarters just okay or pass on the information. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much to everyone for this very interesting insight and the tool and how you work together and how you implemented this already successfully. Before we come to the questions from the audience, I would just like to recap some points and have a broader start of a question to you all. What do you think are the main challenges and lessons learned from this cooperation?
I think the main lessons, I would actually like to hear from Dr. Alpha and Barira, because I think they've been working a lot with people within the countries, building that cooperation across different agencies, different institutions, and in case of Pakistan and Tunisia, different levels. So maybe Dr. Alpha, Barira, maybe you would like to comment what were the main challenges and learnings from the cooperation?
Yes, definitely. It was a quite challenging period in the very beginning of the project, because convincing policymakers and decision makers of how serious is this project and how useful is this tool. It was quite difficult also to build this group of experts, to have the commitment of the members, of representatives of the different department, agencies, NGO, having the support from the different institutions. So it was quite challenging in the very beginning, and it's because also in the very beginning the tool was quite raw, as I have mentioned. So it was a kind of Excel sheet with different entries, and it seems quite complex. It seems quite difficult to manage and to handle. Now it's quite friendly and we can use it very easily. So I think dealing with the tool itself, it was quite challenging, but I think now it's quite easy to manage, and we have also trained people in order to help them understand how to enter data, how to make the interpretation. And now it's a long process, I think.
I will second Dr. Alpha. It is still very much challenging on people getting to work on the tool that is that much comprehensive. It is not so difficult. I have learned that while working with the people. They have said that it is very easy, but it will be more worthwhile if someone from higher side would command us to use it. Again, but this tool has a potential to, like I said, it is we are still convincing people to use it, and we will continue to do that. And it is a very much useful tool. And my lesson learned is that SDGs were developed by the UN while not taking care of the needs and the status of developing and developed countries. So it is a very long way to go. Getting them to work and starting to work on it, it is a very long way to go. So we are doing our share, and let's hope for the best.
Thank you. And I hope so too. And I wish you good luck with the implementation. And I will just go to the questions. We have already 2 questions from the audience. And maybe if other people want to add some more questions later on. I will start with, thanks for the presentations, also from the attendees. And it's always good to know more about how UNU is tackling the implementation of SDG6 in the world. That's, I think, is for Guillaume. And yes, the question is, how would you be able to apply this to a regional and local level?
Yes, that's a very good question. I will briefly answer it. So the Sdgpss is developed at the national level, which means that when you look at the questions in the questionnaires, they all at some point say, oh, at the national level. Yes, the Sdgpss can be used at the regional and local level. I think we see that experience from Pakistan, as Barira Fatima has explained it in her presentation. The way that Pakistan is collecting the data for SDG6 is at the provincial level. So of course, the tool needs to be used at the regional level. Also, something that comes from the experience of our Tunisian partners, as Alpha has mentioned, is that sometimes the data needed by the Sdgpss is collected by organizations working at the regional level. So that data might be at the regional level and not at the national level. So that's correct. But that's something that needs to be improved. As I mentioned in my presentation, when we developed the Sdgpss back in 2016, our understanding of the enabling environment of SDG6 had some limitations that now we know more. And also working with the countries, this has been something we've been all learning together. I don't know if Alpha and Barira want to comment on that answer. So would this tool be applicable at the regional and local level?
Well, yes, definitely. As I have mentioned in my presentation, that we have already noticed some gaps at the regional level. So yes, we have to collect data at the regional level and even at the local level, so that data can be aggregated and disaggregated. This is the case, for instance, for gender, for water policy, and especially in the case of Tunisia, since we are going toward a decentralized system, policy system. So we need to work collaboratively at the decentralized level. And yes, so the data are very important, but we need to be very critical toward what we get from the regional, the local level, and what we enter at the national level as well.
In my view, the difficult part is getting to work together different stakeholders of SDG6, because they are diverse everywhere, not in case of Pakistan. And as respect to local level, we already started from the provinces, and our provinces have diversity. But on regional level, it has the potential to go on the regional level, but with the pace of lesson learned from the already regional hub countries, it is possible. It is really possible.
Thank you. And there is another question, but I think you also mentioned this briefly in the presentations, that it's not just about SDG6, but it also links to other SDGs. And do you see, you can imagine, could you imagine one of the ways to further develop is to capture interactions within other SDGs? And I think this is related to the tool. Can you actually capture this in the tool?
Yes, that's also a very good question. Thank you so much. Yeah, so this tool is specific to SDG6, but I think the message of this presentation is very clear. We need to work on the enabling environment of SDG6 and of all SDGs, because we don't want countries to just have a checklist and say, oh, we checked, we achieved this, this is good, we don't have to look at this problem anymore. But then when you're going to look deeper into the enabling environment, maybe the country achieved SDG 6.1 or 6.2 or 6.3, but when you're looking at the finance aspects, maybe they are not sustainable. Or when you're going to look at the gender aspects, they are not sustainable, they are not taken into consideration. So that's the goal of the SDG6 Policy Support System, is to go beyond that checkbox and to say, let's dig deeper. So to some extent, we are establishing connections between SDG6 and all those other dimensions that we saw in the presentations, which are capacity, finance, policy and institutional, gender, transparency as well, resilience. But to very shortly answer the question, the SDG6 policy support system is not tracking the interactions between SDGs. That can be done. That can be done. That can be adapted. And that's a very good question. That's a good reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And coming back, because you mentioned also the challenges, thinking about some opportunities, I could imagine if you find some gaps of like where your data is missing, for example, you find these new gaps where you haven't thought about this before. Do you think this could be also a base then for new projects or proposals to work exactly on these gaps? Do you have any example or positive experience about that?
I think my partners, Alpha and Barrier, would be best to answer this question. Working with data gaps, is that the question?
Yes, and how you maybe think of like you said, inadequate parts, like an outcome of the tool, and how can you maybe have further projects to move up the level, if this makes sense?
Yeah, maybe Dr. Alpha, Barriera, do you want to answer this question?
Yes, actually, I think the output of the Sdgpss is meant to go beyond the project itself. So if we realize that there are some gaps, this means that there are rooms to, for instance, to look for funds, to look for initiatives, to work together toward building a kind of collaborative work between institutions or department, or so there are still room to look beyond the project, and the one of the features actually of the Sdgpss that it is evolving continually. So we may have the data today or next year or in 5 years. So we don't know how the things are going. Maybe we need to work on a very complex indicator. Probably we have a simple one and we get the data very easily. Some other indicators may need a long time to be built. So we are always creating data. We are always working. And we've been working now since for 4 years, and we did a lot in this regard. And the outcomes was quite visible, as I have shown you, as I was shown in my presentation. So even if the cells are black or red, it doesn't mean that, as I have mentioned, we are a black sheep. So it means that we did well. And we realize that we have some weaknesses and gaps, and this is very important to realize.
There are 2 types of data gaps. One is you don't have a data, and second is you have data and you don't know that. So this is the problem we are facing in large. We have so much policies, we have so much institutions, we have so much information openly available, but we try to address during our workshops that telling people that this information is available on that website. This is how you are going to access it. And this lack of information goes from the district level manager to the top manager level. Even you can say, I will not say in some federal ministries, they will have no idea that certain institution is working on that type of data set. So for that purpose, maybe coordination is necessary. And I think all SDGs are all about coordination, openness of data sharing, awareness. It is all about that.
Thank you. There is another technical question. Do we have or do you have a framework or thematic map that comprehends different uncertainties associated with data management?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's actually very technical. Do we have a no? Well, maybe I think Alpha and Barrera can answer this question from their perspective, working with the data, because from my understanding, one of the issues, and Dr. Alpha can cast some lights on that, is that whenever you are collecting data, well, I would just make a bridge to the comment made by Mr. Faisal Hassan on the chat box, because he comments that most people think SDG6 is only about drinking water and sanitation, and that's a challenge. Yes, exactly. That was the issue. That's the issue we have still. And that was the issue we had in the beginning, because we often talk about drinking water and sanitation, but the newty of and the challenges of SDG6 is that they are addressing water quality, water efficiency, water scarcity, transboundary waters. They are addressing many new dimensions of water and of water issues. And when we were designing with the countries the Sdgpss, we just realized that we basically didn't have enough information about the enabling environment for those new dimensions brought by SDG6. So the uncertainty at some level is because we are still learning. Countries are still setting mechanisms to collect data for those indicators. So I remember once, and I will leave this to Alpha, but she mentioned to us that one of the challenges is that when you get together all those different actors, all those different stakeholders from different agencies, they have to agree on which data is official. So maybe Dr. Alpha, would you like to comment on that? Because I think that's also some sources of uncertainties, right?
Yes, definitely, Guillaume. And some okay, I will make it. Uncertainties are related also to the understanding of the question or understanding of the indicators. So in some cases, we do have a data, but it doesn't correspond to what we have in the Sdgpss, or we are measuring different things in the real field. So this is a very big challenge. So here is a gap of data, and that's why we can have this black box. And we should think about that. And for instance, we have been facing another challenge related to water quality, the 6.3. If you look at the platform of the UN Water, you can notice that there is a gap of data related to water quality. And one of the achievements, I should say, of our multi-sectoral group is that we contributed to producing data regarding this. We have a database on water quality, and one of our members is participating. Actually, it is acting as a focal point, and they are working on this issue related to water quality. So probably we will be among the first countries to produce data about water qualities. And we have a lot of data, but we have some difficulties in managing that and organizing all those data so that we can monitor the enabling environment in a proper way. So this is a very challenging as well.
I just want to add that in my country, each indicator has a responsible ministry, and they have for water quality data 6.1 and 2, they are working with PCRWR because we have a network of drinking water quality assessment and laboratories, and we set up this system, and it is all solely our responsibility. So in that perspective, I would say that maybe a framework like us could work. Like you have a dedicated institution whose methodology is known, that yes, this institution is going to prepare very good data, and you are going to get data. Yeah, that means only one stakeholder for getting a particular data. Like and degree of implementation of IWRM. It's the sole responsibility of Ministry of Water Resources. They are going to collect all the stakeholders, gather them, talk to them, write them letters, and collect from them the degree of implementation of IWRM. So they are using the UN Waters questionnaire in preparing that report. So I think this is one of the framework, but in countries, maybe it may not be applicable. So this is from my side.
Thank you very much. And it's very interesting to see it from different point of views and different countries, the examples. We don't have any more questions from the Zoom audience, but maybe from Facebook, Marit?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Also from Facebook, we don't have direct questions, although there were some people following us on Facebook, which I thank for. But we have a question which was also mentioned in the previous sessions as well for our three panelists. What are your next steps, whether regarding ongoing projects or related to the Sdgpss tool or other cooperation projects in the water sector? So yeah, what are basically your next steps?
Yeah, thank you for this question. That's a very good one as well. Well, at this stage, we definitely need to improve the tool to get all those new understandings and dimensions of the enabling environment of SDG6. Working with countries, especially Tunisia and Pakistan, has brought an understanding to our project partners about how this tool needs to work better. This understanding that we didn't have in the beginning for all those let's say, all those aspects that we've mentioned in this presentation. First of all, in 2016, when we were discussing this project, the understanding of the enabling environment was different. We didn't have as much experience. And when I say we, I'm mentioning the project partners and the 5 trial countries, which Tunisia and Pakistan were part of, Republic of Korea, Ghana, and Costa Rica as well. And of course, and we just talked about that, the indicators of SDG6 were quite new for our countries, perhaps except 6.1 and 6.2 that are related to drinking water and sanitation, that countries had more experience because they come from the MDGs, although they bring new challenges as well, they bring new benchmarks. And so at some point, that's what we aim for now, to update and to get this tool to reflect these new dimensions, and also to have an outcome in the policy and decision making. That's the final goal of the Sdgpss, is to provide evidence for decision and policy makers. So we are always walking through that direction, as we saw in Tunisia and Pakistan. So yeah, that would be my answer to this question.
Would you also like to reply, Ulfa or Barira, to if you have any specific next steps ahead?
Well, I think the next step will be in collaboration with UNU-INWEH, with Guillaume and the whole team, in order to continue contextualizing the system and to make it fit for the country, and in order to provide evidence to the policy and decision makers, because we've been working for 4 years, and I mean, many people, especially at high level, they are expecting, an important outcome from this project in order to feed, in order to help them make decisions. So apart from that, we are working on the scientific side. So probably there are opportunities to work on indicators, to work on data, how to handle data, how to measure. I mean, scientifically speaking, there may be some opportunities to launch new projects based on that. Yeah, so I think probably there will be a next step of the project altogether. And as Guillaume has already mentioned, Tunisia and Pakistan are acting as a hub for the region. So it's very important here to bring people into this project and to show them what we did and to share experience. And we have already organized a workshop at the continent level, I mean, at the Africa and MENA region to show our experience. So we are expecting some opportunities from this side as well.
We are a research organization at federal level, so we are continuously promoting SDGpss with our stakeholders and with the federal ministry, and we will continue to do that. And if and when asked, we give them detailed presentations, and whenever we give them presentation, we tell them about how usefulness of this tool. And likewise, we are very much happy and open to work more with as a regional hub countries, our regional partners, and tell them our experiences, because I believe I'm proud of my country. We are a big country and we have diversity of learning opportunities, so that we are willing to share with the world. And of course, we are always willing to and open to receive more from more information, more knowledge from our partner country like Tunisia. I'm very much inspired to see the presentation from the second time, and of course from UNU-INWEH. That's.
May I add something very important? I have to say that during the second phase of the project, we handed over partly to our contact point, which is the National Observatory of Agriculture at the Ministry of Agriculture, called ONAGRI, which will be the focal point and will be coordinating with the national coordinators now. So this observatory has an open access platform, and they are very familiar in dealing with data, managing data, and producing. So probably they will be the leader for this phase and the next phase. And this is very, very important when such an entity at the ministry level is taking over the project. This means that this is very serious, and we expect a lot from this initiative.
Thank you very much, and I wish you all good luck with it. And thanks for sharing the experience with us and being part of the webinar. It was great to listen to the outcome and to the presentations. And yes, we just shared your contact details. So if there are any other questions, please contact the panelists directly. And thanks again to everyone for joining today. And we will have 2 more sessions within this webinar series. And the next one will be with our colleague, Andrea from UNU-FLORES and TU Dresden. She is talking, or she will hold a dialogue with her partner from Fundación Chile. And please be reminded, this will be not on Wednesday next week. This will be on a Friday, but the same time. And yeah, I hope we will join or see you there. And I wish you a good day or good evening and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks again for joining.
Thank
you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.